When I started homebrewing, I felt like I needed to almost learn a whole new language before I ever made my first beer. And every recipe seemed like it had a new thing on it that I'd never heard of. So I wanted to start my videos out with some vocabulary and equipment that I'll be featuring in the video so that you can get a better understanding. And I'm going to post the vocabulary I'm using below so you can follow along if you need to. So the first thing I talk about is a closed transfer, and that's basically when you move your beer from one container to another without introducing any outside air. What I'm doing actually isn't a fully closed transfer, it's more like a semi-closed transfer because it's not airtight. I mentioned the word line, and if I wasn't homebrewing, I wouldn't know that that meant tubing, so here you go. This is a line. It can be used for liquid or gas, whatever. Sanitizer. So that's what we use to kill all the bugs. You have microbes and wild yeast floating around wherever you live, so it will inevitably get on your equipment. So I really like Star San because you don't have to rinse it off, so you can just spray it on and let it drip dry a bit and go. Liquid line. So basically we're getting into the mechanics of the keg, and the liquid line is how you get your beer out. So it actually is a post that goes almost all the way to the bottom of the keg, and you'll just suck your beer through that, and there is a little attachment on the top that will hook up to tubing and then go into your tap. Gas line is the same idea, except the post is much shorter. It's about 3 inches down in the keg, so it sits above your beer, and the way that the keg works is that the CO2 is pushed through the gas post, and it compresses the beer until it shoots out of the liquid post. So I talk about ball lock kegs and fittings. Ball lock kegs are called that because the attachments they use, they hook on with little ball bearings inside. There's ball locks and pin locks. Pin locks you twist on, and there's a pin that holds them in place, basically. CO2 system. Most people know what a CO2 system is. It's just your tank with CO2, and then you have a regulator which controls how much gas comes out of the tank, and then you'll connect that to whatever tubing you might want. Butterfly valve. So a butterfly valve basically is a way to control liquids. It's a valve that has a disc that you rotate and it'll stop or start flow. And this is what they look like, and this is how they work. Bung hole, probably the funniest term in homebrewing. It's this hole that you put your airlock into, and they come in standard sizes, so you can buy the rubber stoppers that fit whatever fermenter you have. And this is an airlock, keeps the air from getting into your beer and lets the CO2 escape. And the last thing I talk about is priming sugar. And so priming sugar is corn sugar or table sugar typically that you would use. So what you do is you boil water with this sugar to sanitize it, and then you'll add it into your actual bottles. And then you'll create a fermentation in there, so when the yeast eat the new sugar, they'll create CO2, and they'll create enough that it'll carbonate your beer inside the bottle. Well, I hope this helped, and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, to do a semi-closed transfer on the craft brew catalyst system is actually really simple. I'm not going to use the CO2 to force out the beer, but I am going to drape a line into the top to keep oxygen out and just keep CO2 flowing in there so that it kind of makes a protective barrier. So what we're gonna need is, first of all, always sanitizer. going to need a sanitized mason jar lid for our yeast that we're going to take off. I always use a pie dish underneath just to catch any yeast that might fall. It's very simple and fits in nicely. And then we're going to need for the transfer the funnel that comes with the catalyst, some tubing that fits on it, and I have a threaded attachment on there so that I can screw it onto my liquid line. This is a ball lock liquid outfitting, and then we have a gas in fitting, which we're basically going to be using them for the opposite of what they're intended to be used for. You're also obviously going to need your sanitized keg. I have a ball lock keg with the gas release and everything. We're also going to need a CO2 line. So you're going to need a whole CO2 system, but you can totally do this without CO2. It just makes it a little more safe from oxygen. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the ball jar with yeast in it. I've already done this once, actually, with mostly Trub. This is just basically all good viable yeast that I'm going to reuse for the next time I make this cherry saison. So to remove it, you just have to flip the butterfly valve with the lever, and it's a twist off, so it's pretty easy. And try not to get your jar lid dirty. As you can see, it's a little bit messy, and I'm just going to go ahead and re-sanitize this, make it super safe, and drop it right on. Pop that in the refrigerator. After I remove the yeast, I always sanitize the fitting just because I'm a little paranoid, but it should be fine. So the next thing I do is attach my sanitized liquid line fitting to my hose, and these little nuts make it so much easier. Alright, so I've got that. Now, I've started doing this just to clear the oxygen out of my tubing, and to get any leftover sanitizer out of my keg. So what I'm going to do is just connect this to the liquid line, and it'll shoot out some sanitizer and CO2 because it's pressurized. So I'm going to hook up my liquid post to this tube, and it'll shoot out some CO2 and sanitizer that was in there. I like doing this because it also re-sanitizes your tubing. Alright, so now this is filled with CO2, in theory. I'm gonna re-sanitize the outer rim, and then I'm gonna screw it on to the catalyst. Okay, so we are almost ready to start. The last two things I need to do are to connect my CO2, and how I do this is I drape it into the bung hole on the top. I don't want to waste a ton of CO2 doing this, so I set it pretty much as low as I can while I can still hear it. So I start at 0 and just go up a little bit. If I were to pull the lever right now, we would get some of the beer in the keg, but since it's a closed system, it will stop filling because it'll stabilize itself with the amount of liquid that's in the catalyst. So what I do to prevent this is I just attach my gas in fitting without any hose on it. Here we go. So you can see that there's still a good deal of yeast coming down. I should have used a larger mason jar for my second round of yeast pickup, but what I'll do is just cold crash it and dump like the first pint, because it'll mostly be yeast. That's what happens when you make too much beer. Since I have some beer left, what I usually do with it is throw it in a growler and add some priming sugar and just let it ferment, and then save it for a rainy day.